Thank you very much, Joshua, for that very kind invitation. I want to thank Hesabika, the Board of Trustees, all the church leaders that are here, na Wakristo wa kawaida kama mimi, na wale wengine wote, and the wonderful people who sang, those who have given us wonderful food, for all the planning that has gone into this meeting, and all the work that predates today. Thank you so very much. 5 weeks ago, I was invited by the Africa Conference of Churches to participate in the 5th Annual Theological Symposium at Waiyaki Way. And the title of that symposium was The Role of Government in Regulation on Churches and Religious Institutions. We were there for quite a number of days, close to 60 of us from across Africa. And that's when I realized that this issue of government and regulation on churches, religious institutions, was not just a Kenyan issue. It is an African issue, and it is very, very topical. Now, what we are dealing with today, in the olden days, started as sectarianism or division of churches, breakaway, secession. And I don't think any study can do justice to that subject without mention of two people, two scholars. The first one to draw our attention to this subject of secession, sectarianism, division was the late Professor Fred Welborn. He was chaplain in Makerere University, 1946 to 1964. He wrote a very authoritative publication, 1961, East African Rebels. Then later on, he co-authored a book with Professor B.A. Ogot, A Place to Feel at Home. I was privileged to get to know him when he was a professor in the University of Bristol when I was studying there in the 70s. And he kind of got me interested in this subject back in the day. The second scholar was Dr. David Barrett, and his famous publication, Schism and Renewal in Africa, published in 1968. Barrett became fairly authoritative in this area, and he referred to the phenomenon or the reality, the catalyst of secession, breaking away, especially from the colonial missionary societies. He saw the social injustice challenge of the time, the political question during the colonial era, that there was breakaway from those mother institutions, and that breakaway was actually a reflection of their rejection of colonial paternalism. There was a spiritual, or rather a strong political undertone to the breakaway. There was also the economic reality. He observed that with the emergence and growth of the prophetic movement seemed to coincide with the economic crisis and the deep needs. So this aspect of religion as a hustle is not new. It goes back even to those days. There was the cultural component. The African, once the Bible was translated into our mother tongue, people began to read it, to interpret it for themselves. And all of a sudden, our people, with their little formal education, found themselves introduced to the scriptures and to a world that was closer to their own than that of the Europeans. Scripture seems to see the place of land as important, very important to us, the place of family, the place of community. And they couldn't understand why the missionary was distancing himself from the African culture to the extent that they seem to have done, when in fact the Bible was very close in terms of its word to the word that they knew as Africans. There was, of course, the theological side. And one of the aspects, one of the very, very popular subject was the whole question of polygamy. The issue of female circumcision was particular in certain communities, but polygamy cut across all the communities of our people. And the African could not understand how this very normal and accepted institution, so foundational in family, in clan, in tribe, and also practiced by the patriarchs in the Bible, the African could not understand why the missionary had issues with it. And so these and many other factors led to secession and to breakaway and to division. But of course, now we are dealing with a slightly different issue and phenomenon. We are not dealing with division, secession, sectarianism. We are now dealing with extremism, a different concern, the rise of radical fundamentalism, even crime. I'm very grateful to see colleagues from the task force, Bishop Mark Kariuki, Dr. Alphonse Kanga, and Senior Counsel Charles Kajama, and those that we worked with to the best of our ability to try and deliver on this assignment given to us by the President. We started working not long after we were gazetted, and the process of data collection had two sides. There was the public participation side, which was fairly comprehensive, going to each and every county under the leadership of 3 teams. One was led by Bishop Mark Kariuki. The other one was led by Bishop from Eldoret, Bishop Eli Rop, I beg your pardon. And then the third one was led by Bishop Morris, the current chair of the Kenya Catholic Bishops, KCCB. And so it was a fairly strong team. I had a team, we were 19 of us. And so we split ourselves into 3 groups, and we were able to cover the entire country in the shortest time possible. Each team went to about 15 counties, but we made sure that the initial meeting and the last meetings were chaired by the chairman of the task force. And so there was serious public engagement. And I want to begin by saying, when we went to our first meeting in Kilifi County, where Shakahola is, and then we went to the site in Shakahola, in that very first meeting, as chairman, I was very clear what the 2 questions we were going to have to speak to were. And when we were in Shakahola, we arrived there, and there were 13 bodies that had been exhumed before we arrived. And many of those bodies were of children and women. And one of the senior people from the government side, I happened to have been standing next to him, and he asked me the question, Reverend Musyimi, where was the church? The following day, we went to Kilifi, and we began taking public hearings. And I was the chair of that session, one of the 2 that I chaired throughout at that level. And I could tell from my right-hand side, a group that came to be known as Malindi Pastors Fellowship whom I then spent a whole day with the following day in Malindi. The question, not just from them, but others in the meeting, was this: where was the government? So, because basically they were saying we are dealing with crime. So those were the two questions from where I was seated. Where was the church? Where was the government? And so we started the process by public participation. We also did comparative studies, research, benchmarking. We visited other jurisdictions. And together we compiled a report. And this report fell into 4 thematic areas. There was the legal, institutional, and governance component. Secondly, the education and civic awareness component. There was the reporting and enforcement action component, the standards and certification requirements component. Within these 4 themes, we came up with the following. 1, we came up with the Religious Organization Policy 2024. We were clear in our minds that the religious sector deserved and demanded a distinct, comprehensive policy. We also recommended the Religious Organizations Bill 2024, a bill specific and dedicated to operations of religious organizations in the Republic, dealing with issues, for example, of registration, making sure that this registration is devolved to the counties, issues of many other issues in this statute. We also, in this statute, recommended the establishment and strengthening of umbrella religious organizations for purposes of self-regulation. And I commend Hesabika and all those that have supported this process of self-regulation. It is very, very commendable, and I hope we can put our teeth into it, support it, make it grow, and make sure that it benefits the Church of Jesus Christ. You must always pause to remind yourselves and myself, this is the Church of Christ. This is the Church of Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ is God on the cross. It is his church. And so we are glad for this move to get us thinking how we can self-regulate so that the witness of the Church of Jesus Christ can be stronger. In this bill, we've also recommended the establishment of Religious Affairs Commission to provide oversight of a religious organization. You might remember what Bishop David Oginde said. He talked about the role of government to bring about order. Or indeed what the pastor said in Kilifi, asking where was the government? We are dealing with a crime. And so what we recommended really is what you might call a hybrid. There is the self-regulation that can happen directly through the particular religious institution, but mainly for the greater part through the umbrella bodies. But there is also the order side, the criminal side, sad to say, what we saw in Shakahola. That is the responsibility of government. And so there needs to be an institution that deals with that side of the reality, as Bishop Oginde observed in his submission. within this bill, there is also need to name the crime. I remember at one stage we needed to meet people from government, from intelligence, from CID, because we could tell there were gaps in the statute. As we went around the country, we listened to the senior people in the counties everywhere, and there were gaps. And we sat down with these people so that they can help us fill the gaps and deal with those lacunae. So there was need to clarify on the nature of offenses committed under the guise or pretext of religion. Because until there is an offense, how do you take anybody to court? So that offense needed to be named. There was need also to establish a specialized dispute resolution mechanism addressing conflict within religious organizations so that we do not keep taking each other to court. There must be ways we can sort out our manenos internally. And so we recommended in this bill the establishment of a dispute resolution mechanism. Outside of this particular bill, we are also aware that we need to amend the Kenya Information and Communication Act and other acts to strengthen the framework for regulating religious content. We need to review the basic education curriculum to inculcate religious tolerance and discourage extremism. We need to develop material for civic education and build civic competence on the dangers of religious extremism. We need to set prerequisites and standards for religious leaders. Then finally, of course, we also put together regulations. Now, this is simple lawmaking. And if you want to have a different journey as a government or as a people, you need a policy to rationalize that journey. And I was very clear as chairman that unless we had a policy and a bill and regulations, we could talk the whole day. Governments don't work with the recommendations. I learned that when I was in Parliament. They work with the policy and with law. That I learned in my many years as a pastor of Nairobi Baptist Church, with a particular concern for social justice from around 1987, all through the Mlolongo time and the beginning of the tragic clashes, October 1991 in Miteitei, what was then Nandi district. We know God uses prayer, sermons, the way we who work in the civil service or in public service just model the faith is very powerful. But government as an institution runs on the basis of policies and laws and regulations. I learned that also in my years as General Secretary of NCCK, as we were trying to push for a new constitution. I had the privilege of being the chairman of the Ufungamano Initiative when things began to come together as we looked and worked for the mother law. And of course, the 10 years in Parliament. But I pay my personal tribute to Dr. Oliver Kisaka. I was privileged to work with Oliver. He was the Deputy General Secretary of NCCK. As a mathematician, and I couldn't quite figure out how he ended up doing theology, I had problems with mathematics beyond standard 7. So if anybody can understand it at university, that is somebody to fear. So I asked him, Oliver, why on earth don't you do a PhD? God has really gifted you. And eventually he did it. And this is the title of his doctoral thesis from Middlesex University, June 2016. A critical study of the contribution of ecumenical Protestants to the citizenship of Africans in Kenya from 1918 to 1982. I read that thesis at one point, and I think I reread it. And one of the messages that comes out of Dr. Kisaka's dissertation is governments work with policy and law. Governments work. Those are the two instruments on which government works. Policy and law. And so, some of my friends here will tell you, as soon as I was appointed, and even my committee, told them, we shall be wasting our time. If we just give the president recommendations, early enough, we need to make up our minds what the flight path is. And we were very clear and united. And so we gave to His Excellency, as I close, 4 documents. I believe it was in July, am I right? We gave him 4 documents. We gave him the report, our report of what we harvested through the travels, listening, and the comparative studies, and so on and so forth. We gave him the policy that I mentioned to you. We gave him a bill, and we gave him regulations. Basically, we were saying, we are ready to go. We have finished our work. The rest, it's over to you. So let us pray for the president, that the Lord may guide him. He is the appointing authority, so that we may have the opportunity as a country to sort out this issue. And I can say that in the task force, we had the head of the Hindu Council and the leadership from the Muslim community, both sides, Sunni and Shia. And so Catholic, as you heard, and Protestant across the board. So it was a fairly representative group, strongly supported by people from within government. And so I just thought I would share that with you, and then leave the rest of the time to the panelists, to your questions and your comments. But we have a wonderful country. Anything we can do, as we've been reminded, to be catalysts for that which is honoring to God as citizens of this republic. May God give us the grace and the strength and the perseverance so to do. The Lord be with you. Thank you.
For too long, we have been concerned. The time has come to stand up and be